All right. Well, I'll go ahead and get this meeting going, call it to order. Thanks to everybody who's here. As always, I'm Eric Lashinsky with City of Annapolis, Chair of the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Group. At this time, I'm going to ask Charlene to do a roll call to get a precise count on who's here. Thanks a lot.
Great. City of Annapolis.
Here.
Anne Arundel County. Baltimore City.
Okay.
Baltimore County. Jesse's here. Carroll County. Hartford County. Howard County.
Hi, Chris Echop is here and Patrick Smith is here also.
Queen Anne's County.
Good afternoon, Steve Cahoon here for Queen Anne's County. Thanks.
Maryland Department of the Environment.
Here.
Maryland Department of Planning. Maryland Highway Safety Office. MDOT MTA. MDOT SHA.
Here.
And MDOT TSO.
Here.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Charlene. Any guests here today?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Aside from our presenters.
I'm here for East Coast Greenway Alliance. This is Daniel Pascal.
Okay. Hey, Daniel. And then we have our presenters, right? Meg and okay.
Oh, and Laura Bianca.
Well, we can go ahead. I think. Okay. Hey, Bianca. Laura. Sorry. We can go ahead and approve the minutes from the last meeting. Everybody should have received those. They were sent out in advance. I need a motion and a second to approve those.
I motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Any comments on the minutes? Okay.
No worries. I'm on
none.
Got my headphones in, so I'm not totally tuned in either.
Okay. Can I just get a show of yays to approve the minutes? Yay.
Yay.
Yep. In favor.
Any nays? Okay. Hearing none, minutes are approved. Thank you so much. We have gotten past the formalities of the meeting, and now we can move into our first presentation, which I'm excited to introduce. We have Meg Young from MDOT here, from the Secretary's Office, to give us a presentation on the Complete Streets Demonstration Project. I don't know who is presenting. I guess Chris is also going to be part of this, and Kevin from Bel Air. Town of Bel Air. I don't know who's sharing the presentation though. Okay, we got it. Perfect. Take it away, team. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Eric. So I'm sharing my screen, and then I think I'm passing it back to Charlene to share for the others. But as Eric said, my name is Meg Young. I'm Deputy Director of Active Transportation at the Maryland Department of Transportation in the Secretary's Office. So today I will try to be brief because my presentation will also be followed by presentations from Chris Utah from Howard County and Kevin Small from the town of Bel Air. But what I'll cover today is a little bit about our Complete Streets policy and how we're doing with implementation. The Complete Streets Leadership Academy, the Quick Build projects we have initiated over the summer in partnership with our 2 other presenters. And then how MDOT is taking those outcomes and thinking of our next steps. And then after my presentation, as I mentioned, 2 of the jurisdictions are going to do a deep dive into their particular quick build projects. So to set the stage and why we decided to do this quick build project, the Complete Streets Leadership Academy in partnership with Smart Growth America, it's largely because of our updated Complete Streets policy. I say updated, it's not brand new. We had a Complete Streets policy dating back to 2012 that applied to the State Highway Administration. But since then, we've updated so many of our other policies. We've adopted Vision Zero. We've released our pedestrian safety action plan and really tried to elevate safety interventions for vulnerable roadway users, people walking, people biking, people with physical disabilities. And all of this led us to updating our Complete Streets policy last summer in June. It was signed by all of our modes and MDTA to say that any projects in our right-of-way, we will be making a concerted effort to look at safety countermeasures and incorporating design for vulnerable roadway users. And so that was signed in June, but it didn't actually become effective until January of this year. So during that time, we had about a 6-month period where we were working on what we're calling the Model Complete Streets Initiative, trying to work on even the cultural change within MDOT with our own engineers and our own way of thinking about projects. And so this quick build project came in between the signing of the policy and now the implementation, which is taking place over the course of this year, 2025. So our new policy, as I mentioned, applies to all projects in the MDOT right-of-way, but even beyond that, it details new levels of public involvement. So working with local jurisdictions, working with people who use the roadway. It involves more safety and performance tracking. It means every project will be making, will have a Complete Streets objective statement or have to go through a waiver process if for some reason the Complete Streets policy would not apply. That would be things like adding accommodations for people walking and biking would increase the project cost by more than 20%. Or, bicycles and pedestrians are not allowed on the facility, like, 695, we're not going to suddenly have a sidewalk on. So there's a few things that are outlined in the waiver process and are being piloted this year. And then lastly, we're also trying to increase the level of multimodal data we have to really help with all of those other things, evaluating safety and performance for multimodal users. So there's a lot in the policy, and it's linked on the website I'll share in the chat and at the end of this. But it's a cultural change across MDOT and across all of our modes. It's a change of a lot of processes and tracking. And so it is a pretty big lift for implementation. So in 2024, we launched our Complete Streets Leadership Academy last summer to kind of do our soft launch of Complete Streets. Our goals were cross-jurisdictional collaboration, making sure our district engineers are really talking to the local jurisdictions, whether it's Howard County, whether it's the town of Bel Air, the people who are on the ground and know the day-to-day use of a roadway. The goal was to test safety improvements and build buy-in, testing something before it becomes permanent. And it was to identify barriers to our own policies and practices and processes to see, when a district engineer is asked to look at things a different way, where are they actually having roadblocks and where do they see issues, whether it be in permitting, materials, process. So the Leadership Academy brought together our office at TSO that's working on the waiver process and implementation of Complete Streets, brought together the State Highway Administration's districts, and then our 3 local jurisdictions. We had a series of workshops facilitated by Smart Growth America. They're experts at this. They've done leadership academies in several other states. It was great to have them facilitating the conversation. And from these workshops, each local jurisdiction got to work with our district engineers to plan this quick build project, design it, and get it in the ground. So our 3 local jurisdictions, today we'll hear from Howard County and Bel Air. Hagerstown was also a part of this. And so our timeline was pretty condensed. We kicked it off in June. By July, we were designing the projects, and then in August, constructing, collecting data, and everything was pulled out in November, just to accommodate for, especially in Hagerstown, snow and the winter elements. The quick build projects, Kevin and Chris will go into the details of their particular quick build projects, but we were testing out some of the countermeasures with countermeasures from our context-driven design guide that we already have with quick build materials. So things like hardened center lines, lane reductions, increased crosswalks. Actually, some of the crosswalks were permanent and were not taken out from our temporary quick builds. So from this, we've had a lot of outcomes. Here are just 2 pictures from Howard County, from the temporary facility, taking a motor vehicle lane and opening it up for people walking and biking. First of all, Smart Growth America is going to be the one to publish the report on this. That's supposed to be coming out in the coming weeks. Will include the process as well as a lot of the data, interviews from users, and of course, all the pictures and everything. We are also planning our continued education for engineers. I would say the conversations happening between our district engineers and everybody at the workshops was what was most inspiring for me from this process. Thinking about how a state route going through the middle of the town of Bel Air, it's their main street, does not necessarily need to accommodate the largest freight vehicle out there. It is a main street, it is close to an elementary school, and talking through those details and different modal accommodations with our engineers was really inspiring, thinking about how if we're talking about building out a network for people walking and biking, of course, there's also a network for freight, but they might not always be the same. So it sparked a lot of conversations, even collecting data once we got past the design phase, and like how we were collecting data was also interesting to me. And it's something that we know is going to be a continued education for the engineers. Our next training for them is January 30th and 31st, an NHI training sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration about designing and planning for complete streets. So that effort is far from over. We also have a couple of ongoing strategies in development. So all of the materials used on this project have been added to some of our material lists for future quick build demonstrations, and potentially then a permanent materials list. So everything used has made its way into the SHA catalog. And there's this new understanding of a temporary treatment, how we collect data to make it permanent. Another temporary project, the Georgia Avenue bus lane, was a temporary project, and that was just announced to be permanent. So this is not done in a vacuum. We have other SHA districts that want to also try a Complete Streets Leadership Academy approach and want to have quick builds on state roads in their district. So we are planning for that right now. And then we've also allowed quick builds in our new our Bikeways grant program. Will be releasing new types of allowable projects, and based on the success of this, showing that a temporary project can help you plan for a permanent redesign, we'll be allowing quick builds under Bikeways in 2025. So details about that will be coming out soon. So I'd say we got a lot out of it. and we're using it to inform these next steps for implementing complete streets. Over the course of 2025, we'll be revising our guidance, our standards, our manuals and policies. So some of those next steps I mentioned, or some of those outcomes from the Complete Streets Leadership Academy, you'll start to see incorporated into manuals and policies over the course of the year. We're updating our decision-making processes and outlining what our waiver process will be over the course of the year, modifying our approaches for measuring performance, continuing to collaborate over the course of the year, and we'll be rolling out more and more opportunities for education and training. We've been approaching our engineers first. We've done a brief training for advocates and for elected officials, and you can expect to see more of that coming out of our office over the course of the year. So that was quick because I want to allow Chris and Kevin some time to talk as well, but feel free to reach out if you have any particular questions, and I'll drop our Complete Streets website in the chat as well. I think for the sake of time, we should probably go to Chris and Kevin's and then do questions at the end of all three of these, Eric. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll just keep moving. But thank you, Meg. This is exciting stuff. I've seen the policy play out in Annapolis already. So
great.
Go ahead. I'll hand it over to Chris.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me just get on full screen. You guys see the slide? Great.
Yes.
So yeah, Chris Eatoff with Howard County. I'm going to follow right off of all the background information that Meg just provided and provide some specific detail and information on the Howard County project for this Complete Streets Leadership Academy. This was the location that we selected. It's on Route 1. It's the southern portion of Route 1 that's in Howard County, going down towards the county line in the city of Laurel. Route 1 in this area is a one-way couplet. So the orange colored line here is where we did our demonstration project. That is southbound Route 1. It has 4 lanes. Typically, this is the normal configuration of Route 1 southbound, and then an additional 4 lanes on Route 1 northbound, which is kind of labeled as North 2nd Street down there, you see. So yes, a total of 8 travel lanes for Route 1 in this portion of Howard County, which many of us consider to be somewhat excessive, especially since there are very few sidewalk segments on Route 1 in this area. There's high density housing, there's a MARC train station nearby, there's lots of businesses along Route 1, there's fast food restaurants, and yet no sidewalks have been able to be implemented here, mostly because of right-of-way constraints. The road itself is wide, but the businesses are often fronting, and their property is often fronting close up to the road. So there's never been any success in terms of squeezing in a sidewalk between the roadway and the businesses and the property line. So we wanted to see what could be done to work more within those 4 travel lanes on southbound Route 1 and repurpose the outer travel lane into a bicycle pedestrian area to measure the impacts and see how that changes operations and the pedestrian and bicycle experience. Those were all things that we wanted to look at during the pilot. So these images kind of show the concept of what we did here. Again, we repurposed that outer lane on southbound Route 1. You can see it both in the aerial drone view and on the street view there. So we did this for about a 3.5-month period towards the end of 2024. And because it was a temporary demonstration project, we did it with somewhat temporary materials, so mostly flex posts to protect the bicycle pedestrian area, and then a good amount of markings. As you can see there, all the business entrances were marked as crosswalks across the business entrances there, because there's a good amount of them, and vehicles still needed to get in and out of the driveways for all those businesses. So that was very well marked with crosswalk markings and flex posts to basically protect the pedestrian and cyclists from the main travel direction, southbound Route 1. We do have some data from the project. I mean, overall, we do certainly consider it a success in terms of what we learned, and also we believe we improved the pedestrian and bicycle experience and safety considerably during the 3.5 months of the demonstration project. And the data does bear that out. We have to keep in mind that it's only 3 months worth of data, and some of the numbers are quite small, especially the crash data, which thankfully is small. But it does still point to we made improvements, or at least we certainly didn't make anything worse. So this is focused on crash data. The middle chart here is the top chart is for our demonstration period for the 3.5 month period. Kind of number one for me, bottom line, is we did not have any bicycle or pedestrian related incidents during the time of the implementation. That would have been obviously a very bad outcome if we still had crashes while we had the facility up there. So we had 0, and if you compare that to the same 3 month period from the year before, we did have a crash that was pedestrian related that was a fatal crash. So that was an improvement there. We also looked at motor vehicle crashes, totaling all crashes there, because we wanted to make sure that we didn't somehow make it worse for drivers by making it better for pedestrians. And we can see that we did not make it any worse for drivers. In fact, we had a small reduction in the number of motor vehicle crashes from 10 to 6. Just for context as well, we have the total data from the preceding 5 years. It's not really, it's not a comparison period because it's a much longer period. But you can just see that there have been crashes, both bike crashes and motor vehicle crashes, kind of ongoing previously in the previous 5 years. We also took a look at speed data. Reducing travel speeds wasn't the primary focus of the project. The primary focus of the project was to protect the pedestrians and cyclists that are using the corridor already, that were previously just walking in the roadway because they had no facility and nowhere to walk. So they were just walking in that outer lane. So we wanted to provide protection in that outer lane for them to use that area. But we did have a feeling that we might reduce speed by having the flex posts and the markings up there, and just by reducing the overall road width from 4 lanes to 3. And sure enough, we found that we did. The most direct comparison we had was prior period there for US 1 between Davis Avenue and North Laurel Road. That's basically the direct study area. And we went from 85th percentile speed of 50 miles an hour previously to 45 miles per hour during the implementation. So that's 5 miles per hour on a overall 85th percentile speed is a pretty significant reduction. And you could really feel it when you were out there as well, and spent a good amount of time out in the corridor during the implementation and beforehand. And you certainly felt the road was a little slower. I mean, it's still a high-speed roadway. Still 45 is still a high speed, and some people are obviously going faster than that. So it still felt fast, but it felt extremely fast before the implementation. So that was kind of a bonus finding for us. We also looked at bike and pedestrian volumes on the corridor. Again, it wasn't really a primary goal to try to dramatically increase the number of people using the corridor on foot and on bike. It was primarily to protect the considerable amount of people that were already using the corridor without any facilities at all. But we did want to look at this and get some counts. So we were actually able to work with BMC on this. Charlene was very helpful. BMC has a consultant that can do some bike ped counts using 24-hour, 7-day-a-week video camera counting. And that provided this information. So this is the counts for the average day in a few different locations on the implementation area. These are bike and ped combined. I didn't break them out, but it's very much mostly pedestrian. There were only a few cyclists sprinkled into these numbers. So probably 90 to 95% pedestrians. And you can see there that we had, like for instance, in the upper count location there, we had 17 people on average per day. On the blue arrow with 17 is to indicate the southbound side, and the northbound side was actually this does have pedestrian and cyclists. It's one cyclist and 2 pedestrians going northbound. So the good thing about that is our installation was on the southbound side there, or on the southbound pedestrian side on the west side of the roadway. So people were using the facility rather than using the other side of the road. We did manage to get people onto the correct side of the roadway. Same thing on the 14 count there. People were using that side of the roadway. And then we have the intersection count from the North All Road, which is a signalized intersection. So it has some crossing movements also. To see how that compares to before the installation, we have this data, which is basically before and during, with the red data there being from beforehand, which was earlier in the same year. And these are average day counts. So again, we can see increases. It's not super dramatic. I mean, the numbers went up from 28 people total in the going north-south on the Madison Avenue count to 31. Again, you'll notice they've shifted to the correct side of the road where we had the facility. So we were successful in getting people over to the safer side, and a slight increase in volume. And then similar for the North Orr Road, this is a signalized intersection with a bit more control and protection. So there's a bit more varied use of the 4 legs. But overall, there was an increase during the installation. Again, not really the main goal. Like we were trying to protect the people there, but we were finding additional people using the facility as well. These were just pedestrian counts that we had on these numbers. So just as a summary, it's helpful to have some data from this project. We have lots of more anecdotal and more observational things that we learned as well from the facility. We did go out and we did actually talk to facility users. We did intercept surveys as well. It wasn't easy to get these because people are not always open to talking with strangers on the street, but we were able to get some of that data, and overwhelmingly found that all the pedestrians and cyclists that we used at the facility were happy that it was there, and they all felt much safer using the facility with the protection than they were previously. We also did a lot of outreach to the business owners that were fronting this section, because they did have concerns about access to their entrance driveways. So that I think the data shows that went fine overall. We did not increase crashes. They were concerned about rear end crashes a little bit because we were repurposing that outer lane, but people were still able to turn into their businesses. It didn't cause additional crashes. That all went fine, and business owners definitely appreciated us staying in touch with them. We had several touch points with them during the project. Again, just anecdotally, but their main point of concern actually ended up being mailboxes and mail delivery. The mail carrier refused to drop off at their mailboxes, which are curbside, during the implementation. So they ended up having to go to the post office in the city of Laurel to pick up the mail, which is an inconvenience for them, and they were understandably frustrated by that situation. But again, that's why we do these projects, to learn about these little nuances and details, and help us figure them out for the long term. But the data summary was we were able to show that we reduced crashes for all road users, including pedestrians and the motor vehicle drivers. We did reduce motor vehicle speeds, and we did have an increase in pedestrian volumes with the facility. And the really optimistic and promising news from all this is that MDOT is pursuing a pedestrian safety action plan project, a PSAP project in this area of Route 1. It actually is quite a bit large. It includes this area, but quite a bit more all the way up to Gorman Road. And the concept that they're working on and moving into the design phase is pretty similar to what we did. It's a more hardened version with real curbs and real pathways constructed, basically a shared use, repurposing outer lanes to shared use pathways. But the data, the information, the observation, and the anecdotes that we were able to gather during our project is helping inform that project. And they'll be able to figure out the mail delivery system as well as they work on that more permanent facility. So that's all I had. I can stop sharing and we'll move on to Bel Air.
Thank you, Chris. Very insightful. I guess it's Kevin from Town of Bel Air who will be presenting next.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Can everybody hear me? Because I had some difficulty with my audio this morning. Does that work?
Yeah, you're good.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, our effort really was born out of a report that we were doing in conjunction with Aberdeen and Havre de Grace for Safe Streets for All. And it was studying all these various intersections in town, including Aberdeen and Havre de Grace. And at the public meeting State Highway attended, they were somewhat mobbed by our citizens to about this particular intersection, which is, if you can go ahead and advance it one, intersection of Gordon Street and North Main Street. This is a street that is considered, by State Highway as 924. It's the intersection is located, as you can see, in a split in the road where the northbound traffic and southbound traffic separate. It is really the main entry into town from the north part of Harford County. So it's kind of the way what people perceive the town to be when they drive into downtown. You can advance. What happens is the people coming in from north part of the county are driving at a high rate of speed, and then they have to slow down to get into downtown where it's very pedestrian heavy, and that's the part that really was a problem for us. This particular location is also a location where we have walkers going to elementary school, which is nearby, and this is something presented a real issue for us. It's also at a little bit of a crest in the road and a slight curve where the pedestrian's not as visible. If you advance one, and that condition really kind of created some confusion for people driving into town. Because this is at a split, you have basically two left turns, and one going to what would be West Gordon, the other one going to East Gordon. And I think when we did our walk audit, there was an instance where somebody went the wrong way on a left-hand turn in order to go straight across the intersection. So that really was evidence that there was some major confusion, and the people needed to be reduced down the number of movements. Also, this is a connector to the Lyra-Dinder Mansion, which is located west of the intersection, and that is a event venue that attracts a lot of folks every weekend and most of the time during the week. You go one more. That location, again, with the confusion, utilities all over the place. You can see some of the overhead lines, so it really creates some limitations on what we can do. One of the first things that we looked at was the pavement markings, and of course we didn't know it, but that was already in State Highways on their priority list. And so while we were studying the intersection, the pavement markings were improved and the handicap ramps were repaired. So we didn't have to take that much further. Those concerns, again, with visibility and confusion for the motorist, were why this intersection was picked and why it was reviewed. We had a public input meeting. A lot of folks showed up to that and worked out a plan that I think helped address a lot of those issues. You can go to the next slide. And that Gordon and Main again was the highest priority out of all of them. We actually had several other ones that were in the running, but that was the highest one. Next slide. So out of that, the CSLA project was somewhat begun. This had a series of workshops, which Meg's already explained what that is. That walk audit, which was very helpful. I'd highly recommend doing that in the future. It was very educational to everybody, I believe. And input was solicited from either via email, letter on-site interviews, and web feedback. And we got a decent amount of feedback from folks. We also had past data on speed and volume and accidents where we reviewed that. And what was the nice thing is we had, again, experts from Howard County and Hagerstown and State Highway and SGA all kind of looking at this intersection and offering various viewpoints that, sometimes we didn't concentrate on or prioritize. Next slide. So that was kind of the result, was this kind of markup of the plan, which was nice to see that everybody could understand exactly what was being proposed and what was the highest priority, and we could talk that through, which was nice to see. So we took that kind of sketch and then created a plan. Next slide. Which outlined all of the various improvements, and the most significant were speed cushions, temporary speed cushions that were installed at the southbound approaches and the northbound approaches to the intersection. And it really is, speed cushion is kind of a misnomer. It's nothing cushioning about it. It slows down traffic, and that's probably where we had the most complaints from, is people saying how they weren't expecting the jolt that they got when they went over the speed cushion. But that's where we got some great results for slowing down the cars, because they learned over time that they had to be slower than they did in the very beginning. We closed the left-hand turn going to East Gordon. That is the turning movements now is only one left-hand turning movement to West Gordon, and then there's a U-turn that allows people to go back south onto what is called Bond Street. So that left-hand turn, I was really expecting a lot more pushback from folks, but once these went in, we really didn't get that many comments from folks. They seemed to be okay with not having the ability to turn left off of 924 and go east on Gordon Street. The crossings again were highlighted, but that was something that was had already been done by State Highway, so they were kind of way ahead of us on that. We had supplementary signs that reinforced where people were supposed to go, so it kind of reduced some of the confusion at that intersection. It did add a panel sign at the crosswalk on what would be northbound Main Street, and that I love those because I think they do reduce speeds and make people aware of pedestrians, but that didn't last more than a couple of days and it was run over. Unfortunate, but I'm not sure how long those things will last in conditions like this. We did eliminate a parking space on that side of the road on what would be the northbound Main Street, just to increase the visibility of pedestrians who are getting ready to cross over, because that's the longest crossing. That's 2 lanes. And then we narrowed the lane width of some of the turning movements and some of the lanes, such as the U-turn going back south on Bond Street. So there was a lot of various improvements that were implemented, and it was something that I think when taken together really had a nice effect on the traffic. Next slide. And I'll kind of click through these. These are ones that show the speed cushions that were installed. These are temporary. I think this is one of the first places these have been installed, which is kind of nice. I'm not sure. What we'll probably end up doing is taking these, because this was something we kept, and we'll put those in local streets to see if we can provide a demonstration for other roads that may need some speed control. Next slide. That's the left-hand turn closure, which we've had our first snow, and the flex posts are still up, which is kind of amazing. I'm hoping that it remains up through the winter, but that again, I expected people to be upset, and they have not been, so that was a nice thing. Next slide. So the crosswalks again were very helpful, and that the visibility of that crossing and where it says PED Xing, that I think has helped out everybody's awareness as they move forward or as they use the intersection. So we ended up doing measurements before the implementation, and then we did some measurements while it was up. And we had probably a reduction in speed of about 4 to 5 miles an hour, which I was very happy with. I think that made a huge difference with vehicles moving through the intersection. We also are going to, we already had on our books is to do a kind of an area-wide traffic study, and this intersection is included in that. And we're going to measure the speed once it's been, the improvements have been removed, because we're hoping that the users keep their speed down. I can understand the speed will come back up for a little bit, but I'm hoping that habit will have been created where the folks will slow their roll when they come and approach this intersection. Next slide. We solicited input really from various users. Again, some of the kids going to school and their parents. Nearby businesses, users of the intersection, and the only one we had was the fire department wanted to be able to keep that left-hand turn in. But it was because they're volunteers that were responding to calls, and they figured out a workaround, and they were very cooperative on how that was, and to allow us to keep that left-hand turn closed. Again, we have conducted the measurements, speed and volume, and determined there was nice effect on the traffic. I think people felt that they were safer going through the intersection. And especially, again, this is affecting the kids that are going to the elementary school, and so that was our highest concern. Those other area studies we're going to do, that'll happen probably around April. And we'll provide that to Meg and SGA to kind of, it'll probably be after they've completed the study, but we'd like to give them that so that they can see if there's been any lasting effect. And one of the final things we did was about a month ago, we had our elected officials pass a resolution to request SHA keep that left-hand turn closed and replace it with a median. And that, I think, one, will improve the aesthetics coming in from the north part of Harford County into town. And it will, I think, clean up some of the confusion or the various choices that people want to make going, taking left-hand turns or doing U-turns on that intersection. That's something that I'm hoping that we can coordinate with State Highway and be able to make that permanent and have that be something that can happen next year. Laura Bianca Pruitt's on this call. She helped out quite a bit from the town's point of view. And I think that's something that she will continue with as we look at the next intersection in our Safe Streets for All study. So I'm sure we'll be back trying to see if we can do another demonstration project here. That's all I've got for what we've done. I think we'll probably end up having a little bit more information on the results here in the next few months.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Very inspiring. we are dealing with the same stuff here in Annapolis. So I'd like to open it up for questions. I actually have an initial question. Maybe if Meg is still here. My question is about what the complete street policy or maybe state direction says in general about lane widths, given that in a lot of these cases we're looking to narrow lanes. Does anybody who just presented have any input on that? It's more of an MDOT question, I guess, but
Yeah, that's getting a little deep into the weeds of engineering standards. We are definitely allowing for temporary treatments of trying more narrow lane widths. I think with the new MUTCD, there is some range allowed. We've again had discussions of, lane widths aren't meant to accommodate the largest freight vehicle in every situation. So I think there's going to be a lot more context sensitive designs coming out, especially if it's in a local plan that says this is somewhere where we want to prioritize the movements of people walking, biking, and we know that narrowing the lane width is going to reduce speeds and therefore make things safer. There's more allowance for that, but having language like that and outlining areas where vulnerable roadways or pedestrian safety is really paramount for a local jurisdiction, it's going to go a long way, because our waiver process specifically references looking at local plans at a much deeper level than was previously our practice. So I don't know if Molly's on the line from SHA has anything to add. But our new policy, will just allow for more flexibility within what is already outlined as allowable.
I mean, I know it's good to hear that it's on your minds and you're hopefully going to come out with some more direct. I know you do lean on the MUTCD, but I think Maryland, the context sensitive design guidelines, I think, are probably a good vehicle for addressing this stuff, in places where they can definitely be narrowed. I saw that Daniel from East Coast Greenway just posted the Hopkins report, which a lot of people are referencing these days. If anybody hasn't seen that. Any other questions out there from the group?
Okay. Put one forward if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
I was curious about, the potential for this is incredible, and I commend MDOT and all jurisdictions for working together on this. Like, this is not something I see in other states I work in and that other states my teammates work in up and down the East Coast. So really excited, and I know I don't want to get ahead of myself that it's just going to suddenly be demo projects everywhere. But in terms of scaling it up over time, and thinking about, the major projects that are on the tip and various other lists of projects and priority letter projects that are out there, is there a way to assess some of the, sort of the quicker build projects, like the ones that are, squarely like clear, overly built roads that are, close to population centers? Like, is there sort of like an analysis that could be done that looks at some of these opportunities coming up to have even more, projects per year?
Yeah, I think that's something that our State Highway Administration has been chewing over. Sad to say, Joe Moges, who is our chief safety officer, just left us for Montgomery County. But he did leave us with some plans in terms of doing this again and trying to take lessons learned to make it an internal program. I think we leaned a lot on the Smart Growth America folks for executing these projects. And it was up to the local jurisdictions in this case to pick the streets that they wanted. But all of the planning that they'd done on the local level, like I have to really commend Kevin and Chris and Jim who led it up in Hagerstown, because they put a lot of time, thought, and effort into picking these locations. As Kevin mentioned, their location in Bel Air came from their Safe Streets for All grant. And so if we see those sorts of planning efforts coming out of our local jurisdictions and they touch state roads, I think those are going to be some of our top picks of this is a local priority. In some cases, yes, they're in the priority letters as well. But where there's already a lot of planning and footwork that's been done, I think those are definitely the lowest hanging fruit for us to say, all right, then let's give it a try. We have local buy-in and support to make these changes. So again, we're hoping to do another round in 2025, but as far as turning it into a permanent quick build program, it's going to be a stay tuned, because there's so many moving pieces right now as we update all of our guiding documents. And another round is going to help us solidify what's allowable in these temporary demonstrations and how can it be done more frequently.
Thanks.
Yeah. A new round will be in the new fiscal year, I can say that, which starts July 1 for us.
We'll take it. Any other questions before we move on to the presentation? Okay. Well, thanks again, Meg, Chris, Kevin, and everybody on your teams who've been part of this. Yeah, big thanks. Thanks for joining us. We're going to move on to the next presentation, which is from Jesse Bialik from Baltimore County, giving us an update on the Torrey C. Brown Trail Extension Feasibility Study. Charlene, are you sharing your screen for that?
I believe Jesse's going to.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. I didn't think it was working earlier, so I did the magic plug it back in, and it seems to be working now. Okay, I'll share my screen. 1 second. Looks like it's going to be you, Charlene, because it's not working.
Okay, just 1 second, and I will get that pulled up. Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
Why. It's just grayed out.
That is odd. Okay.
Let's see.
Oh, wait, I got it. Did I? Yeah. Or you can do it. It doesn't matter.
Whichever works. It's not fully loading on mine for some reason. Sorry.
Yeah, because it's very large. All right. I think I figured it out now.
Okay. I'll
If
stop
you
sharing.
wanna. Okay. So sorry. Goodness gracious. I'm fired. Okay.
It's trying.
It is trying. It's trying so very hard. Kind of like me. Okay.
Okay. I've got it loaded. Jesse, if you want me to.
Yes, please just do it. Whomever, you win. Let's do it.
You guys for your patience while we tag along on this. Okay.
Okay. Now I'm stuck in
Here we
strange
go.
limbo mode. Okay, good. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. As Eric said, I'm Jessie Bialik, bicycle and pedestrian planner for Baltimore County. We were awarded a Maryland Bikeways grant a few years ago to do an extension study of the North Central Railway, also known as the Torrey C. Brown Trail, from its current terminus at Ashland Road down to Jones Falls Trail and the Baltimore City line. Go ahead, Charlene. So just some background on the project. Like I said, the Torrey C. Brown Rail Trail is also known as the NCR Trail or vice versa. It currently extends 19.7 miles from Ashland Road to the PA Maryland line, and then it goes north from there into Pennsylvania to the York County Heritage Rail Trail and extends an additional 21 miles north to York, PA. The existing trail surface is 10 feet wide with a stone dust surface and is managed and maintained by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. So the goals for the project were to look at extending the trail approximately 7 miles south into Lake Roland, which basically then hits the border of Baltimore County and Baltimore City, and to create a trail that's accessible for all users and improve the active transportation and, of course, minimize impacts to natural and cultural resources in the area. And, of course, encouraging people to use a more active transportation. So because we're going through very urban areas of Baltimore County, where we're going to have to use different types of facilities for the project, such as the shared use path, bike lanes, and as you can see, protected bike facilities, which are shown as some examples at the bottom. You can go ahead. So what I'm going to show next on the right-hand side is a key map going from north to south, showing what in our extension project is what Baltimore County considers our most feasible option for a connection between the two. So I won't bore you to death with like reading off every single one, and but I did kind of want to give folks like an idea of where we were looking. Just an FYI, we have the whole extension study on our webpage, which I can send a link in the chat for that so that people can review the entire feasibility study at their leisure. I believe it is like 200-some pages long, so trying to condense that for folks is a little bit difficult. So I thought maps would be best. So this is the beginning of the extension project. So there's a current terminus and parking lot at Ashland Road. So this section would be putting the proposed shared use path within an existing railroad right-of-way. There are a couple bridge structures that are still semi-intact that we would be looking to rebuild that were destroyed during Hurricane Agnes back in, I think, was that 1972. But some are actually still in decent condition, surprisingly, after all this time. So on a couple of them, we would just have to replace the decking, but it would again be a 10-foot wide stone trail, very similar to the existing trail to the north. Now we get into closer to Cockeysville, so that actual railroad right-of-way dead ends into York Road in Cockeysville. We would then be doing a signal and a refuge island for a pedestrian and bicycle crossing of York Road, and then going along this very small railroad avenue, which is very narrow. I want to say maybe like 10 feet wide. So we wouldn't really have to do any sort of infrastructure improvements to that. And then go through Cockeysville Road. And then there is another railroad right-of-way that we would pick back up to the east of that, or to the south of that, I guess. Looking at the map. We continue down that railroad right-of-way again, 10-foot wide, same as the existing trail, until we intersect Warren Road. Our idea at Warren Road is to do a road diet and remove the two-way center turn lane and install a shared use path along the west side of the road with a grass median buffer to separate the bicyclists and pedestrians from the roadway traffic, excuse me. So if you're getting confused, I'm pointing like people can see. On the right-hand side is our key map. So each time I go further south, it kind of shifts down. So hopefully that can keep people more oriented as to where we are. So moving south along Beaver Dam Road, which basically is Warren Road, it just kind of changes names. We would be continuing the road diet to remove one lane in each direction and this two-way center turn lane to do a continuate shared use path along the west side of the road with a grass median and buffer for separation there. Same thing along Beaver Dam Road all the way down to where we intersect Padonia Road. We would have to put in a small bridge along the shared use path of Beaver Dam Road. And then there's a proposed crossing at Padonia Road for the trail, which would be located on the east side of Deerco, which is Beaver Dam Road. It changes names again to Deerco Road as you head further south on the map. Again, we would be looking at doing a shared use path along the east side of the roadway this time on Deerco instead of the west side. So as people cross at Padonia Road, we'd kind of have to do a legged crossing to get people to the other side. And then we would be transitioning from a shared use path adjacent to the roadway to a two-way cycle track with physical separation once we hit Green Spring Drive, which is again the same road with a third name. Fourth name, third name, I can't keep track. Basically, that two-way cycle track would have a physical separation from vehicular traffic along Green Spring Drive and then pick back up on Timony, or excuse me, not pick back up on Timony Road. Then we would utilize the existing sidewalk and install signage because of the highway overpass that we were about to intersect into. So then we jump back on, staying on Deerco and Green Spring Drive. This is another option that we could do. So we actually had two options for that one. So this one we would be doing a shared use path instead of the two-way cycle track as a possible alternative to that. And then using the existing sidewalk and widening it to 8 feet. There was plans to reconstruct this parking lot, which is actually the light rail station at the Timonium Fairgrounds for people that may or may not be familiar with the area. And so we would do the existing sidewalk instead of the two-way cycle track along this area, and then continue to use the sidewalk as we traverse the highway interchange there with I-83. Then we are hitting Timonium Road at this point, so we would be widening that existing sidewalk from 5 feet to 10 feet. And then, oop, no, it's okay. All good. I was just going to say, depending on which direction you take, we would also be installing separated bike lanes along the road heading to the south, which is Thornton Road. We'll take Thornton Road all the way down with the separated bike lanes on each side of the roadway and pedestrians utilizing the existing sidewalks. Thornton Road then dead ends into Seminary Avenue. We would install separated bike lanes along each side of Seminary Avenue until you get to the highway overpass, and then we would transition into a shared use path, which would then transition into a two-way cycle track with physical separation. Moving along, there's actually some county-owned right-of-way here that was old HOA property that we would be looking to install a shared use path in to get folks off of the roadway while still heading south on Thornton Road, where we will then intersect West Joppa Road. So then we would be doing a bike boulevard and putting in new sidewalk, and that's just a little residential court there, and then putting in a little proposed bridge across Roland Avenue, and going back to a proposed shared use path heading down south into Lake Roland. Same thing, continuing on the shared use path. And then as we get closer to Lake Roland, we would need to put in a proposed boardwalk, and then we would use the existing unpaved trail that heads into Roland Park from there, Lake Roland, excuse me. And then this was the second option that we had as well, where instead of using the shared use path off the road, we would be installing bike lanes and a two-way cycle track along Thornton Road. So we'd do either one. And then same thing for this one, except we would be changing and not using that small court to the north, but continuing along the south of that to make a shared use path that would then intersect Roland Avenue and then continue across that into the park property. Same thing here. Excuse me. So now we are in the Lake Roland proper property. So we were tossing the idea back and forth of converting the existing unpaved trail into a paved shared use path, or doing something similar, which is a crush and run or a stone gravel situation. We hadn't really made it that far yet, but we'd do some sort of trail enhancement. And so this is just showing there. So this is already just the existing trail within Lake Roland. If any of you have been there, it goes along the lake. It's very nice. And then it gets to the light rail crossing. So we would be making improvements to the existing at-grade rail crossing there, and then tying back into the existing trail network around the lake. Again, tossing back the idea of converting the existing unpaved trail into a more shared use path format, but not exactly sure. And this option shows us that we were thinking about putting in a proposed bridge over the light rail, but MTA was not necessarily a fan of that. So they said that they would have to look into it, but they couldn't really say yes or no when we presented them with the plan months back. And then again, tying back into there. So then this was just an alignment option summary showing the sub options we had for Greenspring Drive as well as Roll and Run, and the impacts and costs between the options. Most of them are negligible between the sub options, with the option 2 of building the bridge over the light rail tracks, of course, making the cost go much higher for that sub option there. And then we did a preliminary design impact comparison with our sub options, as well as a cost estimate and cost range. Of course, building a bridge over the light rail would bump the cost up significantly. So these are our next step for future design phases. So we finished our conceptual design and our feasibility study. Our next step would be to identify and allocate funding to a phased approach to the project. We currently do not have any funding in the county's budget to continue with further design at this time. But if we were, then of course we would have to go through NEPA and MEPA and do all our environmental studies, including our wetland delineation, forest delineation, as well as our preliminary engineering. And you all know the drill, so I don't need to go through that. You're all experts on this. And that's it. That's my contact information at the bottom. If you would like to get a hold of me, like I said, I will stick in the chat a link to the full feasibility study for anybody that's interested in reading all about it. And that's the end of my presentation. Anybody have any questions?
Well, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's very impressive. I imagine you're going to phase this, or are you biting it off at once?
Oh no, there's no way.
So where do you start?
So we would start at the north end where the existing terminus is, because there's already existing right of way there. The trail, like the railroad bed, is already there, and that just seems like the most logical place to start.
Gotcha.
Because we wouldn't really have to like acquire right of way or re-engineer a bunch of stuff. It's just like, you know, a lot easier than going from south to north.
Could I ask how far down that first phase might go?
I don't know at this point, since we don't have any funding to do any more work on the project at the moment. We haven't put a ton of thought into what that phasing would be like, but we have said that internally that's where we would start, would be the north.
Also, the parts that look like you already have the right of way where you're putting in a cycle track and kind of reallocating road space, I would think those would be less costly. I don't know if that would also factor into their phasing, like further north pieces, the ones along all those roads.
Right. So what we talked about doing is kind of doing it in like mile sections, since the whole stretch is about 9 miles, kind of, not that you can split 9 up evenly, but you know, kind of the best we can do it.
Right.
Jesse, have you thought about or discussed maintenance of the future facility at all yet? Just makes me think about it because obviously it chops and changes a little bit between pathway and then on street.
Sure.
You know, I think we're all having similar conversations and discussions about maintenance of these kind of facilities that are like not necessarily off-road trails, not necessarily on street, but you know, kind of in between or back and forth.
Yeah, we haven't even delved into that yet, but that's definitely an issue for all of our projects.
Hi, Jesse. This is Brooks Phelps from MDP.
Hi.
I was wondering, I think the segments continuing the trail from Ashland and then the section that leads into Lake Roland are really kind of like what the existing trail is. But I was wondering, during the planning phase, the initial like route and choice for the right of way there, were there? I'm assuming the corridor along the existing light rail and along, say, Railroad Avenue, where the planned trail kind of switches to a cycle track and toward roads was explored. But were there some issues there that that aren't apparent to me?
As far as using the light rail right of way, is that what you're asking?
Well, and along that corridor.
Yes.
Because it looks like there's a lot of green space along in that area.
So if you're referring to the light rail right of way, we had a discussion with MDOT, and they were very much opposed to us putting any facility with anywhere near their light rail. So that was pretty much immediately off the table. I'm not sure what other green space you might have been referring to, but
well, yeah, I mean that would be it along the way.
Okay.
But,
yeah,
you know,
no, they were like,
that,
absolutely not, no way. That's way too dangerous.
sure.
So.
Well, given that is the NCR right of way, that kind of puts a stop to it.
Yes, exactly. Well, if anyone else has any more questions, please feel free to ping me. I'll stick the link in the chat. And thank you all for having me.
Jesse, can you tell me again who funded the study?
It was a Bikeways grant.
Okay. Cool. All right. Very cool to see. All right. Well, we're going to move on to, thank you again for that. We're going to move on to the last presentation. It's from Charlene on the update for the Bikeable Baltimore region plan. So
Great.
you have
Thank you.
that already teed up. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. As you know, I'm Charlene, the active transportation planner at BMC, and I just wanted to give an update on the Bikeable Baltimore Region project as we recently closed our second comment period. So we started this project in December 2023, so we're a little over a year on it. We're currently where this orange dotted line is at, completing the second comment period. We're now analyzing the comments that we received and processing that information. And then we'll follow up with the steering committee meeting, advisory committee meeting, also be doing implementation, cost benefit analysis, and prioritization and costing. So this is a map of the proposed regional bike network. So it includes bikes that are comfortable and safe to bike on based on current plans for the Baltimore region. This proposed network is what will be updated during this next phase. So the second comment period is referred to as the presenting phase, and that's where we should share this proposed regional bike network and solicited feedback from the public and our steering and advisory committees. The comment period ran from November 10th to January 10th of this year. We had an in-person public meeting on December 10th at the Baltimore Unity Hall and had 48 attendees, as you can see in the photo, and had some really great conversations. We also had a virtual meeting on December 12th and had 65 attendees at that event. We had 601 total online map comments and 159 survey responses, and we received almost 6,000 project website views and 2,500, a little bit more story map views. So pretty good traffic. This is a map of, this is an image of the online comment map where people could place points and provide different comments about the proposed regional bike network. We received a good number of comments throughout the region, which was great to see. So we've got our kind of total numbers here, which add up to the 601 total comments. We asked for people's input, as I mentioned earlier, that'll help identify needed changes to the regional bike network. The comments will also shape the project's recommendations for implementation strategies, and will also help us as we refine the performance objectives and performance measures, which are the ways that we'll measure the success of the regional bike network over time. So I want to thank you all for helping spread the word, especially our partners, many of you who are here today. I just wanted to highlight some of the ways that this comment period was shared. So you guys shared it in emails in your newsletters, like the Commuter Choice Maryland and City of Annapolis shared it. We also had some of our partners reshare posts on social media, which was really great. Clean East Coast Greenway, Southwest Visions Foundation, Bike Maryland, and many more. And the project was also featured in 2 press pieces with WBAL News covering it, and then the Baltimore Banner, which we saw an uptick of traffic when those were released, which was great to see. And then BMC also shared it through our social media, through various posts, highlighting the comment period, our public meetings, and also using some of our handlebar interview graphics to try to reach more people. And we also featured it at each of our active transportation newsletters, which go out monthly to around 5,000 subscribers. So that's a quick update on what's happening with Bikeable Baltimore Region, and I will be following up with the steering committee members as we schedule the date for that next meeting, and then following up with our advisory committee members. So many of you will be getting an email from me soon. Did anybody have any questions?
Charlene, I wanted to ask a little bit about, I guess, how you're managing some of the backlash. And so I attended the online public meeting, and there was a decent amount of, I think it was just a couple of individuals, but they were, really trying to make their feelings known very strongly, that they were, not, I don't think even so much against the plan, just against biking improvements, specifically in Baltimore City. it was very, Baltimore City focused. So I don't think that's a huge surprise to most of us that know that there is a faction there. But it's certainly cropped up in your outreach and public input, as well as a lot of obviously very supportive feedback as well. So what's the strategy, or how is that working itself through the outreach system?
Yeah. So I would say overwhelmingly, we had a very positive response. And as you mentioned, we did have some people who had some critical feedback, and mostly not wanting to see bike facilities happen kind of at all. Is the feedback that we were getting from them mostly. Some of the ways we're addressing it is as we advance the project and work on the final presentation materials, we're going to emphasize that this is a region-wide plan. Nothing's going to be built and without more public outreach and more public input. So we want to emphasize that there are additional opportunities for people to have their feedback on these different segments as our local jurisdictions advance them. We also I think that's kind of our primary focus with that. And then just working with Baltimore City to make sure we're communicating things clearly is our main focus in addressing it.
Yeah. I mean, is there other ways to kind of quantify what you mentioned that, overwhelmingly positive?
Yeah.
It's one thing to say that, but as part of your study, can you show that, you got this many comments and this percentage were positive and only this percentage were negative? Is that feasible, possible in the
That
work?
is possible. We have through our public input system that we use, they do have a, I think an AI model that will tag things as positive or negative sentiment. So that's something that we could highlight. I think that's a good idea, Chris.
Yeah.
Yep. And I know with the first comment period, we asked people if they support a regional bike network.
Yeah.
And so that was 90 to 93% of that. So I think it's definitely going to be important to emphasize that there is broad support for a connected regional network.
Yeah, right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'll go. Hey, Charlene. Yeah, thanks for all the work on this. It's an incredible lift for the region, and it's really the first of its kind, I'm pretty sure. I'm curious too, in thinking about implementation and the trails plan for the state too. I've been really digging into Baltimore County's part of the East Coast Greenway and trying to kind of troubleshoot what could be possible in terms of it's weighing a lot of things that I think probably a lot of jurisdictions are doing, where you try to figure out, should we go after the really high stress stuff, the LTS4, and try to bring that down, or should we try to build out really comfortable stuff from the ground up, or you do both? I saw on the map on the network there's a lot of data in there, and you have sort of goals for the different segments. I'm curious if there's sort of a strategy, or is it, I'm guessing, case by case of like how do you get the network to be as close to family friendly as possible, and knowing that there's just going to be some places that will be LTS3 or something that really only certain cyclists are going to ride, and versus like even creating a trail like experience that maybe one day this network could be even an envisioned trail network that would be separated from traffic, whether that's off-road trails or cycle tracks with sidewalks that are all separated from traffic.
Yep. So yeah, Daniel, you mentioned the level of traffic stress, which is an analysis that the state did that we also used, and it's quantifying bike facilities and roads on how comfortable or stressful they are to bike on. And this plan's goal was to primarily identify a network of lower stress facilities that are comfortable for most people to bike on, and not just the experienced cyclists. We did identify a number of areas where there are like gaps, where there aren't any planned or existing facilities that could be addressed later, and then some high stress segments. And BMC is going to work with our partner jurisdictions to figure out how we want to address those going forward. And this plan isn't, once this project ends in June, it's not going to be, a static map. It's going to be, we anticipate, updated over time as plans change, maybe area studies are done, so that it can better reflect a connected low stress network. Another part of the project will be, during this part of the project will be a prioritization process. We haven't begun that yet, so I can't give a ton of details. But you guys will be involved as advisory committee and steering committee members. And that will also involve, costing, identification, and then kind of timeline with that as well. So that should help hopefully identify maybe some of the higher priority sections of the network.
Great. Appreciate that. I'm looking forward to the next steps. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Charlene, how do we respond to the question about the very visible gaps that are still in the network? I mean, I think we could be, it would not be presumptuous to assume the future Bay Bridge expansion would include a dedicated trail. I'm not familiar with the other gaps so well, but is there a reason why we're not including those at this stage?
As a part of the network, the network
Yeah.
was limited to existing facilities and then planned bike facilities that are in local plans. So if it wasn't a part of a local plan, we did not typically include it in this. So that's where you get some of those gaps. And at this point, I don't think there's, that's kind of in between jurisdictions in a way. So I think that's why, like that crossing doesn't have a specific bike facility identified there. But it's definitely something we want to highlight in this regional bike network plan, identifying gaps, making sure that we communicate that those are priorities, I think can be helpful as, the planning continues, especially for that crossing.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think showing them is huge, at least. But I think some of them hopefully will be addressed in the short term. Okay. Any other questions out there? All right. Well, tell us again on the schedule that this will hopefully be wrapped up when?
June 2025. Yep.
Okay. Gotcha.
So summer this year. It may spill into July, but we're shooting for June.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. All right, we're getting close to the end of the agenda here. We're now at the always fun roundtable discussion where we go around from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and representatives share their updates on active things going on in their world. So I always have the pleasure of starting City of Annapolis. I'll just say that we are not much new, frankly, because we have a number of major capital projects that I update every meeting, and the major one is the major one is the West East Express. That's our Torrey C. Brown Trail, former rail line turned trail, and federally funded through TAP and RTP, and we are getting close to 100% design on that. So we're hoping to break ground by the end of the summer, early fall. And then we are working on other connections in the city, some of which have been funded by MDOT Bikeways program, and hopefully getting started on one of in February, March would be the, at least the RFP would be the Bay Ridge Avenue Bikeway. We have a few others that are in progress, but I know Will, you're on the line too from Annapolis, my colleague from Department of Transportation. Is there anything else you would like to share?
No, I think you and I are in cahoots, so I think most of what you mentioned is probably what's going on.
Yeah, the only is the we are doing a trail signage. I just remembered.
Yes,
that is a thing.
Yeah.
We have a consultant working with us on new design standards for our bike waste signage and our water access network as well. But hopefully that will be complete by late spring, and then we'll start to be able to install some of the signs when some of these trails open up. So that's it for City of Annapolis. I don't know that we have anybody from Anne Arundel here, but that would be next on the list. Anyone from Anne Arundel?
I don't think there's anybody from Anne Arundel today.
Anyone from Baltimore City here today? Okay. Jesse from Baltimore County, anything?
Me again. We are same thing as you, Eric, just working on some of our capital projects. We are doing Baltimore County's first complete street design that's going along Old Core Road on the west side of Baltimore County. We are having a public meeting for that on Wednesday, February the 5th. If anyone's interested, I'll put the details in the chat. So that's very exciting for us. And as far as our other projects go, just cranking along, hoping to get some semi-final and final design completed on our 10-ish projects by spring and fall of next year.
Okay, good to hear. Carroll County, anyone from Carroll County here? Didn't think so. Hartford County? Okay. Chris, Howard County?
Hi, yes, our main update is we are preparing for our annual transportation open house in Howard County. It's going to be January 30th, and it's at the North Laurel Community Center. So if anyone's interested in attending, it's our main public outreach event of the year. We do lots of public outreach, but this is we all get together with all our various departments and provide information on everything that's going on with transportation, including transit, bike and ped, and everything else for the public, and take public input on projects and on just general policy and direction as well. So it's January 30th, North Laurel Community Center, and it's from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. It's open house format. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Steve from Queen Anne's County.
Yeah, thanks. We have a couple things going on. We're continuing construction on the South Island Trail, which is along Maryland 8, south of US 50 on Kent Island. We're have a phased project to extend that trail 2 miles, and each phase is in a different portion of construction design and implementation, but all of it's moving forward. We're got a land use connections grant from BMC, and they're helping us look at extension of the Cross County Connector Trail. That's the trail that runs from the Chesapeake Bay across Kent Island across the Kent Narrows heading east. And we're looking at trying to extend that 2 miles east, and we're doing a feasibility study on that now. And then we also are trying to figure out how to do a feasibility study for a bike ped overpass crossing over US 5301 on Kent Island. We have the 2 trails I just mentioned, the South Kent Island Trail and the Cross Island Trail, or the Cross County Connector Trail. And what stands between them is US 5301. So somehow to get them connected, we have to get over it. And so trying to start to tackle that with a feasibility study is on the agenda this year. So we're starting to think about how to do that. So thanks.
Appreciate it, Steve. And I would just add, since Anne Arundel County isn't here today, if anybody else happens to drive Route 50 frequently, you'll see they have a major project that's under construction. That's pretty exciting. The Broadneck Trail that connects the B&A Trail to Sandy Point State Park. So you can start seeing people using that already along US 50 near Annapolis. All right. Anybody from MDE here today?
Hi. Yeah, Catherine Salarano here. I don't think I have any updates for y'all today, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Anybody from Maryland Department of Planning here? Okay. Highway Safety Office, MDOT Highway Safety Office.
This is Meg from TSO. I'm going to put something from the Highway Safety Office in the chat. Their safety grants have opened up for the year. And so those applications are open until the end of February. And these can be used for all sorts of educational and encouragement activities. In particular, I know Cynthia has been looking for people to do some bike education, helmet giveaways, and light giveaways. So if you know a nonprofit or organization that would like to do those activities, please encourage them to apply. It's a pretty flexible grant program.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Eric, if I may add, on Cynthia's behalf to go along with that, they're having their Highway Safety Summit on January 30th at the Hilton Baltimore BWI Hotel. I'm sorry, the summit is on April 29th. The registration will open on January 30th. So I'll drop that in the chat too, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up. That's another great offering from the Highway Safety Office.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Cindy. Anyone from MTA here? Okay. SHA?
Molly Porter here. Just sharing that we are wrapping up the first phase of our public engagement for the round 2 pedestrian safety action plan projects. That'll be finishing up this week. So we're excited to have those moving forward. And thank you to everyone in this group who's participated in both the round 1 meetings and the round 2, and look forward to updating you all as those projects continue.
Okay, thank you, Molly. TSO is next, but we've already heard from Meg. Anything else?
Oh, I still got more, of course, but I'll just mention a few other things. The statewide transportation trails planning effort is ongoing. If you ever want to join one of those meetings, please send me an email or email mbpac@mdot.maryland.gov. Our next advisory committee meeting is on February 7th. And then towards the end of February, dates to be announced, we'll be rolling out our annual grants workshops for all sorts of sustainable transportation grants, biking, walking, adding in TOD this year. So dates to be announced soon, but end of February into March, using the same format from years past. We'll be going all over the state. I'm sure we'll have one for the Baltimore region. So I will send that to Charlene as soon as it's announced to make sure everyone hears about it.
Awesome. Great to hear. We're up to BMC as our last roundtable participant. I know there's a few other people from BMC here. Any news to share beyond what Charlene has already shared?
Say we're wrapping up the 30% preliminary design for the Patapsco Regional Greenway Study Run Trail segment and the Get Us to Southwest Area Park segment. You've gotten updates on the Transportation Land Use Connections project in Queens County. We're also working on one in Anne Arundel County. Currently looking at different concepts in Brooklyn Park area. And we just kicked off preliminary design for Patapsco Regional Greenway, Cherry Hill segment in Baltimore City.
One other thing I'll add is we're getting ready to release a request for qualifications for on-call consultants for the next round of TLC grants. And so maybe around April, we'll come back to BPAG and announce, that we're going to open that for jurisdictions that are interested in applying for another grant. We should have a couple 100,000, so we could do, I think, at least 2, maybe 3 projects.
All right. Great to hear. Cindy, you have comment, question?
Yes, sorry, I had one more thing on behalf of the Highway Safety Office. So this year, the state is updating its strategic highway safety plan, their 5-year plan. A lot of you have your local plans out there. Some may be on the same cycle. So throughout this calendar year, they will be working on that, and they're starting with some public meetings. Those will be announced in the next couple of days. So I'll be sure when I get the list that I give it to Charlene to send out to all of you. They're going to have 4 around the state. The one in our region is going to be at CCBC Dundalk on the evening of February 19th. If anybody is interested in going, I'm not sure the structure of the meeting, but it's to get feedback for their new strategic highway safety plan. It may be small breakout groups, it may be tabling event. I'm not sure yet, but I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar because it'll be in the next few weeks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Cindy. Well, that's our roundtable. We're at the point in the meeting where folks can share any new business. I know we have some outside participants as well here. Anything people would like to share at this point? Okay. Well, before we adjourn, I'll just say our next meeting is scheduled for March 19th. Same place. And we'll be sending out agenda minutes closer to then. Anything else, Charlene, before we adjourn?
That's all. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Stay warm.
Thanks a lot.
See you.
Thank you, everyone.